Everyone, welcome back to Daily Devotions. Pastor Steve here walking with you in God's Word. Joshua chapter 6, and it is time not to just cross over the Jordan, not to just camp at Gilgal, but it is time to have the Lord go before in conquest, in battle. And Joshua chapter 6 is so unique because as you go forward in battle, you think to yourselves of being able to talk about fights and battles and wars and being able to make your warriors ready. But this battle, it's the Lord's. And he's going to do it in his way. And he's going to do it in a unique way. He's going to do it by inducing fear, by confusion, by bringing down walls, by marching around the city and blowing horns. And as he does that, it actually just continues to minister to the people of Israel, to the army of Israel. This is the Lord's. There's no way that these walls, these fortified walls, this incredible city called Jericho, that doesn't have people going in or coming out. It is fortified. It is secure. And people marching around the city for 7 days, inducing fear and confusion, and then 7 times on the 7th day that the walls come tumbling down. Only answer to this is divine. The Lord is for us. The Lord is fighting this battle. And as we get to see in chapter 6, you'll see it over and over again. The main focus is the Ark of the Covenant. The presence of God with his people, even in battle. And so, no further ado, chapter 6 of Joshua. Now Jericho was tightly shut up because of the Israelites. No one went out, and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its kings and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have all the people give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the people will go up, every man, straight in." So Joshua son of Nun called the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it." And he ordered the people, "Advance. March around the city with the armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord." When Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The armed guard marched ahead of the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. All this time the trumpets were sounding. But Joshua had commanded the people, "Do not give a war cry. Do not raise your voices. Do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout." So he had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once. Then the people returned to camp and spent the night there. Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets went forward, marching before the ark of the Lord and blowing the trumpets. The armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord while the trumpets kept sounding. So on the 2nd day, they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. They did this for 6 days. I want to pause there real quickly of being able to try to put myself into that camp. Try to put myself into that walk. Here is a fortified city. Here is Canaanites, known, as we know before, as people of battle, people of war, great giants in amongst that city. And my leader tells me to, hey, let's take the Ark of the Covenant with the 7 trumpets. Let's blow these 7 trumpets so that they know we're here. And let's just march around the city and then go back to camp. And let's wake up and do that the next day and the next day and the next day. By the 3rd or 4th day, my humanness says to me, what are we doing? This is not the way of a battle. This is actually maybe giving them confidence of being able to say to the Israelites, what are they doing? But this is where I love the writings of the scriptures or of Joshua, it doesn't make sense to my humanity. It doesn't actually put into place what I would do. Rather, what they're doing is a faithful walk. God told Joshua to do this, and Joshua told the people to do this. And guess what? They're doing it. Because this is the way of the Lord. And so, as my humanist tries to creep in and taking this as a devotion and being able to say, especially in my life, in my walk, sometimes I'm like, what am I doing? What are we doing? Church? How are we walking? But really the question shouldn't be what are we doing and trying to let that doubt and that humanness and that nature come into effect, but rather being able to say, what did God ask me to do? What is he saying? Am I listening to what God said? Am I doing what he wants me to do? See, this walk for these 6 days, I just see it as faith. I see it as hearing the word of the Lord and just doing it to action, because the Lord said, go to the Jordan and it'll be cut off and you'll be walking around dry ground. And guess what? It happened. I've heard from my ancestors before that as they came out of Egypt, they had a whole army over them, and they were so fearful, and all of a sudden the sea before them walled up, and they walked across on dry ground. What God says, I'm going to listen, because he takes action. He does what he says. Faith. Let's listen to God and his ways. Verse 15, it says, on the seventh day, they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except that on that day, they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the people, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. But keep away from the devoted things, so that you will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise, you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. All the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord and must go into his treasury. You go into battle, don't be selfish. This is the Lord's battle. Everything belongs to the Lord. Another test, another actually spoken word to be able to walk in faith. Verse 20, when the trumpet sounded, the people shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the people gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So every man charged straight in, and they took the city, just as God said they would. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. This is actually a pledge and actually a command that God gave to Moses when they entered into the promised land. Joshua said to the 2 men who had spied out the land, go into the prostitute's house and bring her out and all who belong to her in accordance with your oath to her. So the young men who had done the spying went in and brought out Rahab, her father and mother and brothers and all who belonged to her. They brought out her entire family and put them in a place outside the camp of Israel. Then they burned the whole city and everything in it, but they put the silver and the gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. But Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute with her family and all who belonged to her, because she hid the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. At that time Joshua pronounced this solemn oath, cursed before the Lord is the man who undertakes to rebuild this city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn son will he lay its foundations. At the cost of his youngest will he set up its gates. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. A solemn oath, let Jericho not be rebuilt. Well, here's the reality. Here's the history of the world, right? It's been built over 24 times of this city building on top of each other. When you go over there today, it's just a city built upon a city, upon a city, upon a city. But being able to know that those cities didn't stand. The solemn oath actually came true. And this is what I want you to just hear from Joshua chapter 6. God's word is fulfilled. God's promises, they come true. God's word, it stands forever. And so, are we listening? What would God want me to do? Even if it seems maybe sometimes it doesn't make sense. I don't understand. It's the Lord's. And we follow his word. Not trying to melt together our humanness with his divine. But rather, he is God. I am not. I am following his word, his truth, his way. I'm following Jesus. Even when it doesn't make sense. Even when it might mean a little bit of discomfort. The Lord's ways are always the ways. And in that, we can say, thanks be to God. Have a blessed day.